Hi everybody, welcome back. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead and hit subscribe so that you'll get any new content as I post. And if you are not new to the channel and it's been a minute since you've been on here, you want to go back and look at the first video. Would probably be really helpful in explaining why the channel looks so different than it typically has. Let me start by a disclaimer, as always, that this clip, as all others on here, is educational and informational only. It is not designed to serve as a replacement for clinical or mental advice or intervention. And there's a little bit more of a longer disclaimer in the description. So please take a look at that, and that has my website on there as well. Way to contact me. I appreciate a couple of people reaching out and letting me know, hey, I would like for you to talk about your experience with intrusive thoughts. So I hope that was helpful. But I wanted to come back on and circle back to a couple conversations I've had this week and really about this idea of like why the implementation stage for me was so challenging, why I think it could be so challenging in general. So again, I talked about kind of stage 4 being this, moving through, implementing, practicing, getting good at what we practice, right? Because there's a truth to that. We get good at what we practice. So before I launch into this, let me start with my quote that I've been saying a lot lately. It's my favorite quote because I think in it embodies pretty much everything we need to know about not just, my recovery from benzo withdrawal or medication adverse effects, but recovering and being effective in my life in all areas, non-reactive, intentional, driving the car, being in charge, being in the driver's seat. That quote is, in between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our own response. And in our response lies our ultimate growth and freedom. So I want to, keep with that quote again as I explain my process of, as I began to really try to implement DEAL, which was my acronym that I came up with for myself in terms of my own process of deciding, evoking a non-engagement response, radically allowing the symptoms to be there, and living my life. The whole purpose of that was to begin to carve out that space between the stimulus, the symptoms, the way I was feeling and thinking, and my reaction to it. And, when I was as sick as I was, it felt like there was no space. So that becomes a very important piece of this and why implementation stages was so hard for me, for sure. In part because as I made that decision to, I know what this is. This is an overtaxed, highly sensitized, out of whack nervous system. And I know, like I said in the last video, that there was like a screen 1 and a screen 2. Screen 1 was what was happening to me. Screen 2 was my reaction to it. And honestly, these screens felt like they just merged into one big messy thing. And as I began to do the work through DEAL and go through this practicing and getting good at what I practiced, it was really hard because there was no immediate gratification. I began stepping out more into my life and carving out that space between the stimulus and the response well before the symptoms began to release or abate or move at all. And it's very hard. It was hard for me, for sure, to remain committed to my decision when terrible and terrifying weren't necessarily going away. I've a couple people reached out this week, and it was good to hear. A couple people that I work with in my coaching practice, and in my practice with people and the few people that I work with, my focus is certainly not, diagnosing anything. That's not my role. It's not what I do. This isn't medical advice. But it's people that reach out and they're like, you know what? I want to begin to implement DEAL in my life. I feel like this makes sense. I want some help with accountability, some goal setting, working, towards kind of growing that space between the circumstances in my life and the way I'm reacting to them. And I think that's where I'm a good fit with people. and have done my best work with coaching. But I had a couple people reach out this week and they said, oh my gosh, I'm feeling better. Oh my gosh, I feel like I've got the hang of this. I feel like, I finally understand, that, I have to work to manually put the space in between the stimulus, the symptoms, and my reaction to them. And that was collapsed for so long. And so really good to see them beginning to get some traction and build back out alongside feeling probably still pretty bad. And so that was, very good to hear. In my own experience in thinking about like why the implementation process, even though you can intellectually know, I know this is what I want to do. These are the decisions I want to make. These are the goals I have. This is what it is. The symptoms are going to do what they're going to do. And I need to begin to carve out that space between them and my life and my reaction to them. And it was hard because, for me, I had to get really good at practicing a couple things. It was a combo platter for me of like this almost like hold my beer mentality. I got so sick of feeling the way that I was feeling. I got so tired of myself. I was so tired of hearing myself. I was so tired of feeling crippled. I was so tired of feeling scared. I was so tired of feeling bullied. I was so tired of living in fear like a child. And I was just like, screw it. Like, hold my beer. Let's go. And it wasn't a fight. It wasn't like a hold my beer, let me fight my symptoms. It was more like, no one's going to hold me back. Nothing's going to hold me back. This has taken too much. And, I may not control the symptoms, but I can control my reaction. And I'll be damned if I'm going to continue to be living in this little cramped corner, terrified of my mind, my body, my life. And I had to, that was a big deal for me to get to that place. And it was the beginning of movement for me. And I had to couple that with a little bit of humor about the absurdity. I mean, I would literally think, this is absurd that a human being could feel this bad. I did not know that was possible. And I kind of moved out of like bewilderment and shock and awe and more like, this is freaking absurd. And then coupled with the recognition that, and this was a big one for me, that, as I was trying to build that space between the stimulus and the response, even though I had the hold my beer mentality that was working for me, I was trying to look at the absurdity of it. Where I was also going wrong was that I would kind of race towards health, meaning I would be like, screw it, I'm going to, go from basically living in my, bedroom forever to, going out to dinner and going to movies with a friend. Well, that's where I wanted to get to. But what I would often find is that's what I would I'd kind of over push it a little bit. And what was really, really helpful for me was to begin to think about, okay, I'm standing on one side of the football field, and my goal is to get to the other side of the football field. I talked about this in a previous video. I got 100 yards to go. That's my goal. I can see my goal. My goal is to cross this field and to get to the other side. Well, what I would find myself doing would be like pushing myself and running 6 steps and then feeling totally overwhelmed and basically feeling like I was running 7 steps back. Or then I'd run 5 steps ahead when I would feel okay. And then I'd go 6 steps back. And what I realized is that, number one, I was not getting to the other side of that field. Number two, I was taking tons of steps, right? Versus like what I learned to do was like, okay, I want to get to the other side of the football field. That's made up of 100 yards. Okay, instead of running 10 yards at a time, let me run 1 yard. And maybe I stop for a minute, catch my breath, hang out there for a minute, and then I go the 2nd yard, and I go the 3rd. And I found that doing it that way, really being very intentional, and breaking down my ultimate goals into operationalizing them into small, tiny, strategic bits, right? So again, here's the 100 yards on the football field. Old me would be like, I'm going to sprint 20 yards, but then I'm going to be gasping for air and want to throw up. So I go back 15, right? So I'm wearing myself out. Now I've just gone 35 yards, 20 up, 15 back, versus had I gone to 1, caught my breath, decided to go the next, Maybe the next time I can do a yard and a half. Maybe I need to sit still for a little bit longer. Then I go another yard. Number one, I'm not killing myself. I'm not wearing myself out in these flights into health, and then these, oh my God, I'm in a setback. Oh my God, I did too much. So really for me, what was most helpful was being very slow and steady, being very intentional and patient, being very committed and driven. I was certainly fed up with my small life, but I had to look at, okay, where do I want to be? And let me begin to grow towards that. And with a lot of intention, with a lot of being realistic about my goal setting, about my decisions, having some accountability about how I was doing it so that I wasn't just like flinging myself around. And then, I was guilty of that, right? Like, okay, I'm going to drive cross country. I'm going to suddenly go out to dinner with friends 3 nights in a row. I haven't been out with friends in a year, but I'm going to go do 3 nights in a row. Oh my gosh, well now why am I so freaked out? Why do I feel so overwhelmed? Did I overdo it? Then I'd get stuck in the rumination cycle of, oh my gosh, I did too much. And what was helpful to me was to recognize, let's stay committed, know what my plan is, know what my decision is, know what my mindset is, be slow and steady, be intentional and patient, be committed and driven, and see what I need to do. I wasn't somebody before this that was great at operationalizing my goals, meaning, I had really relied on a very creative, highly functioning brain. So I would take on big projects and just throw myself into them, and probably wear myself out. But, I had a really nice, robust nervous system, and I was able to handle a lot of stress. I was able to handle a lot of strain. And I learned in this, maybe not so much. And so instead of, being, again, these flights into health, these flights into these glimpses and tackling something at a fever pitch, it was like, let's just be a little more intentional. Let's be a little slower. Drew Linsalata, who I love, one of the co-hosts of the podcast Disordered, wrote a book called 7 Seconds Slower. I think it's what it's called. And he was talking about his own experience with anxiety and how he would just be like flinging himself around, throwing himself into exposures, throwing himself into life and exhausting himself and almost racing around, trying to outrace the fear, trying to gain ground before, reality caught up to him. And he talks about in the book, just being able to take things and slow the pace down a little bit. Let wisdom, the speed of wisdom is not super fast. And we need to let it catch up to us once in a while. And so for me, when I found myself finally ready to be like, okay, I've been fragile like a bomb for a long time. I got it, I don't got it. I'm really ready to implement this. I'm really ready to make this decision. I'm really tired of this. And I don't really feel any better than I ever did. But I'm going to mechanically begin to build in a second in that space between stimulus and response, and then a minute, and then 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and then an hour. And sometimes I need to stand still. So, again, I think that as I share my story, it's such an interesting experience, right? Because so many people are like, well, you couldn't have been that bad if you were able to do that, because I can't do that. Well, for over a year, I didn't think I could do it either. But I got to a point where I was like, I don't know that I have much choice but to begin to do something different. Because for me, and again, I can't speak for anybody else, but time alone and time not doing things. And I was doing a lot of rumination, a lot of just sitting, staring almost catatonically at the mental movies in my mind. The weird feelings, the weird thoughts, the catastrophic narratives, the where did I go, the existential voids, like all those things became these mental movies in my mind that took over and they played instead of real life. So the implementation phase for me was very, very hard. And it required a lot of discipline. It required a lot of patience. It required a lot of grace. It required a lot of slow and steady. It required a lot of doing things different than I'd ever done them, which was with a lot of intention and a lot of commitment to the idea of, okay, let me work to build that space between the stimulus, the things that are triggering me, the symptoms I'm having, the feelings, the thoughts, the experiences, the circumstances, and how I'm reacting to them. And let me choose to teach my brain something different. And as I built space between those stimulus and response, and I grew my growth and I grew my freedom to choose how I was going to respond. I used the information I'd learned about the nervous system to help that and to recognize that as I choose to not respond with second fear, with a lot of, the doubts are going to be there, the scary thoughts are going to be there, the scary symptoms are going to be there. And I'm going to kind of work to be a well versus, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. And as I began to be committed to that, I realized that I was teaching my brain that the invalid barrage of danger signals that I was getting, I wasn't going to validate them any longer. And slowly but surely, over a very long period of time, not in the short term, not immediate, things began to shift. All right, guys, hope that was helpful. And, again, in my sharing my experience, please know that, I know we want our experience to be just like somebody else's. And that's just never going to be the case. I heard from somebody today, so it's not my quote, but she talked about compare is despair. And I think that's true because I think I know that I was so suggestible that if I heard somebody's story, my brain would be like, well, they're in their 40s, not their 50s, or they took one med versus three, or they had other stressors and I don't, or they had more stressors and I don't, or I have more stressors than them, or I'm a different gender, or I don't, I was always scanning for like how this person isn't like me. Even though I was hungry to find somebody like me, I was also scanning. My scared brain was like, no, this won't work for me. I'm different. I'm unique. I'm special. My whole system is working differently. And again, we are unique. We are special. But for me, I had to drop that specialness and say, you know what? I'm going to stick with the facts. I'm going to stick with what I've learned about the nervous system. I'm going to watch people and take the cues of people that have come before me that have talked about the need to begin to claim their lives back. And, I always go back to Frankl. I always go back to James Stockdale. I go back to these people that were surviving circumstances that were just horrific, and how they began to do it. And so building that space in between is a really powerful place for me. It was the most powerful place for me in my own journey. Thanks, guys.